From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and ahead today, one of the speakers at a special prescribed burning seminar during the K-State Research and Extension Conference yesterday. Oklahoma State University's John Weir discusses the seriousness of the eastern red cedar incursion in Central Plains grasslands and why ramping up the control of cedars with prescribed fire is essential to turning the tide. Then the next in this week's conversations with County Extension agricultural agents attending the conference, Sarah Moyer talks with Cody Miller of the Phillips-Rooks Extension District in northwest Kansas. And on this week's K-State Horticulture segment, Raymond Cloyd discusses, among other things, the value of dormant oil applications to fruit trees. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
Science Communication Week is coming to Manhattan November 6th through 11th. Kansas State University, Sunset Zoo, and Flint Hills Discovery Center are bringing together local science students, professors, and professionals, as well as journalists from National Public Radio and National Geographic to share their insights and discoveries. Find out about all the free public events at k-state.edu/SciComm. That's k-state.edu/SciComm.
As we've been bringing up throughout the week, this is the week for the annual Research and Extension Conference at Kansas State University. Extension personnel from all around the state have gathered for a number of educational sessions, one of which was in the form of a special seminar on prescribed pasture burning. Covered a number of topics under that umbrella, and one of those was the unintended consequences of fire exclusion when it comes to pasture management. The individual brought in to address that topic is out of Oklahoma State University. He's an Extension Natural Resource Ecology and Management Specialist at OSU, and now we're visiting with John Weir. John, your topic gets to really one prime enemy of all who want to preserve our native grasslands. That's eastern red cedar, correct?
That's correct. That is the poster child for, I guess we could say, mismanagement.
You describe the spread of eastern red cedar in the Central Plains as the green dust bowl, which may to some sound overdramatic, but it really isn't, you say.
That's right. And, again, we all go back and we have that knowledge and that history of the Dust Bowl and what it did to our country and what it did to our region, in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas. That's very vivid. Again, a lot of times, too, we had really good pictures of that. And I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing this green dust bowl. And again, it's not as rapid, it's not as quick moving as what the dust bowl was. It's been slowly coming, it's been slowly building, but we're seeing those impacts now definitely manifest throughout the region in the form of again, loss of habitat for native wildlife species. Again, we see several key species throughout our region here that have been listed as threatened or endangered due to loss of habitat, and a lot of that loss of habitat is due to the encroachment of eastern red cedar. We see livestock production go down, carrying capacity, stocking rates, weight gains go down as cedar increases and cedar cover increases on that. We're also seeing, again, in the last several years, it's been a kind of a two-edged sword. We've been seeing what the drought has done and the extent of wildfires, but also if you go back and you start talking to those people that fought those wildfires and that were there, the biggest culprit and the biggest problem they had of trying to suppress those fires was the cedar problem.
They're torches, basically, when they get lit.
Whenever they're dry like they are during those drought conditions, they become very volatile. They do have volatile oils and stuff that help enhance that flammability of them. Again, it makes it very dangerous, very risky to work on trying to put those fires out because a lot of times you can't get near them. Also, again, the potential for firebrands being lofted and starting fires behind firemen and entrapping them can be a great problem.
And what is largely behind all of this is as you describe in your title of your presentation, the exclusion of fire over time. In other words, land managers getting away from fire as a control tool.
That is correct. So, again, eastern red cedar is also, as we say, it's a poster child, but it's also, at least it's one of the, it is actually one of the best species that we have to try to control to work with because it's, a non-sprouting species. So the means is that you can, cut the tree off below the lowest growing limb, or we can burn it totally up. It will not come back. Now, it comes back from seed, but it will not sprout back from the roots or anything else, say like an oak tree will. An oak tree is a sprouting species. We can top kill it, but it will come back from the roots. And so that's the best part of that, at least cedar's doing that. And again, that's why cedar wasn't an issue historically. As you look across the Great Plains, cedars were supposed to be here, but not in most all these settings. Again, they were typically confined to the major river drainages, draws, rocky canyons where fire couldn't get to them. And they grew in those little shallow rocky outcroppings and, was very much confined there. And so with fire, cedar is a non-issue. You don't even think about cedar, don't even talk about cedar with fire being present. But as fire's being taken away, cedar's been allowed to extend out of its historical range. Also with a lot of the plantings that has occurred in the last century, again, cedars a lot of times were readily available seed sources or plant sources from places. They'll grow in any type of soils. They grow rapidly, so they've been a great ornamental. So you look at cemeteries, you look at old home sites, you look at old schools, anything like that, shelter belts. What was one of the main things that was planted in those? And that was cedar trees. And so again, that's helped proliferate that species as well. And again, that lack of fire has allowed it to escape from those ornamental settings around homes and things like that it was at.
That's not just a casual observation. Research has pointed out this departure from fire over time and periods of time makes a stark difference in the ability of cedar to take over a given acreage.
That is correct. And again, showing that, you look back at the historic accounts and looking at fire scars, we can see a lot of fire. There was a lot of fire. Native Americans were the fire setters and the fire starters, and they used fire to manage the land and to keep things back. And again, as we've gotten further away from that, we've gotten further away from applying fire. And again, a lot of times, sometimes we'll apply fire, but it's a one-time deal. And land managers won't come back and do it again, because fire frequency is the key. Because a lot of times, we can burn and we can kill the cedars that may be there, but we got to remember their seeds were deposited. If the neighbors aren't doing anything to control their cedars, mammals, small mammals and birds are bringing seeds over onto your place. You've got to continually to keep working at it.
What is the ideal frequency then?
What we've seen from a lot of research doing different, even arid areas in the western part of the state and stuff, in lower rainfalls, even the eastern part with higher rainfalls, is about a 3-year fire return interval. So at least be burning about every 3 years. That puts a lot of those woody plants back in their place, knocks them back down, doesn't allow them to get real tall. If you wait longer than that, you're going back to about pre-treatment cover by the end of 3 years.
And the more frequent, the better, presumably. Then.
The more frequent, the better. And then a lot of times, too, what happens then, if we burn frequently enough, and let's say we get into a drought period or things where it makes it difficult to burn because of either lack of fuel or conditions are too dry and we're not comfortable with our fire and doing that. So we miss a couple of years burning. No big deal, because we've got it under control because we've been burning frequently. So we can skip a few years and get things going. So that's the good thing about already applying that fire and getting things done and getting it accomplished.
Within the calendar year then, what's the preferred time to burn for control of eastern red cedar? You addressed that very directly toward the end of your presentation, John.
Well, I've got a couple of different answers for that, but one of them is I think sometime around January 1st till December 31st is the best time to burn, so year-round. We have done some work and stuff. We're working on getting it published, but showing that growing season burns, that July, August, September time frame has been some really good at controlling eastern red cedar. But again, we still get good control any time of the year. Spring burns are fine. The thing is, just burn something.
Well, for those areas which are overgrown with eastern red cedar grasslands, can they be recovered? A very difficult question to answer, isn't it?
It is a difficult question, and a lot of times it's a difficult process, but also it's an expensive process. And it's, can you afford to convert it back? But then at the same time, it's one of those deals, the question is, can you afford to let it get that way? Because you probably can't pay for it to get it to come back. So if it gets too far gone, where just fire, it doesn't seem like fire by itself, or if you're going to have to burn it, it's going to have to be under some extreme conditions, and you're not real comfortable with that. We're going to have to go in mechanically, and then we're going to have to cut trees, open it up, get some fuel, find fuel growing back in there, getting that thing doing. It's going to take a longer period of time. It's going to take more money to get it done. Also, again, what do you do with those piles, and what do you do with all those downs? So it becomes a difficult process. And I would say, no, it's not impossible to recover it. It will recover, because the thing is, our native plant communities are very resilient. Even if you had an area that was totally covered over with cedar and you went in and cut it, you don't have to replant it, anything else. Let it set. It's going to come back. Those native rhizomes, roots, and stuff are still down there. They've just been shaded. They've just been suppressed by lack of sunlight that's going on. But once you open that back up, get that sunlight back on there, things start growing back again, and it'll recover.
You shared so much in your presentation, we can't get to all of it. But one of the notes that you made to the audience was that eastern red cedar is not just an intrastate problem for Kansas, for Oklahoma. This is a regional problem and should be dealt with as such through allocation of resources to combat it and so forth.
That's right. It's just like the Dust Bowl. Dust Bowl didn't show state boundaries. This green Dust Bowl of eastern red cedar doesn't stop at the state line. As we look at it, it's always a lot easier to work as a group to get things accomplished, get things done. It's a regional issue that's going to have regional consequences, but I think we can fix it regionally with, again, regional funding, regional research, regional extension outreach work that's going on, and everybody working together. And if somebody finds a better way to do it, let's adopt that. Let's just don't say, well, that's Kansas, that won't work down here. Well, yeah, it will. They don't know state lines.
Presentation was terrific, as are your insights here. John, thank you for sharing them with us, and appreciate having you here on the campus this week.
Well, thank you, and glad to be here, and always enjoy coming to K-State.
He's John Weir, Oklahoma State University Extension Natural Resource Ecology and Management Specialist, and he talked about the imperative need for eastern red cedar control and amping up those efforts as part of pasture management. That was part of a seminar on prescribed burning that was conducted this week at the Research and Extension Annual Conference here at Kansas State University. We'll return with more after this. This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer here with another extension agent from Kansas in Manhattan this week for the annual conference going on with K-State Research and Extension, and of course pulling them into the studio to spotlight what's been going on in their area. And here now we have from the Phillips-Rooks District, Agriculture and Natural Resources agent, and you also do a little bit of 4-H youth development, Cody Miller. Good to have you on, Cody.
Thanks, Sarah. Certainly good to be here.
For those folks who may be less familiar with the Phillips and Rooks counties, what should they know about your agriculture landscape?
So Phillips-Rooks, we are in the north central Kansas there, and basically the agriculture breakdown, rangeland, pasture land, but then prominently cropland as well. The main crops that we grow in our area, obviously wheat, mainly in the summertime, and then corn, soybeans, grain sorghum, as well as alfalfa, feed for the cattle, kind of a very diverse area to live in.
And with a diverse set of crops and operations going on, of course, that comes with diverse challenges. And so will you walk us through some of the highs and lows of your year and what's going on in agriculture with that?
Back clear up, I know I did a report with you on the wheat harvest, and wheat crop was actually much better than expected to begin with, which was great because we needed the bushels since the price was not very good. So then moving through planting season, things there were great. We were wet early, and then about midsummer, the spigot shut off, and we were very dry. We were one rain away from having some phenomenal crops this fall, particularly our soybeans. Those were very shriveled, depending on the area of where you were. Certain areas caught a little bit more rain. They had some tremendous yields, some of the others below average, unfortunately. Then on the grain sorghum side, same thing. We're having yields all over the board. Some of the double crop grain sorghum is maybe a little below there, but we've had some tremendous yields and just kind of all throughout the spectrum. Corn, our corn acres this year were way up on planted acres comparatively to where we have been. A lot of producers, they were worried about the sugarcane aphid, and then also that as well as the herbicides, the chemical control in weeds, more options in the corn side than the grain sorghum. So there's still a lot of corn to be picked out there, but they're chewing through it. So with the snow on Tuesday, that certainly set us back a little bit, but we just had a skiff of that, kind of shut them down for a little while, and they're back at it, running again. All in all, we're making it through, but if, again, the price would come back, it would certainly be a blessing for sure.
And that being one portion here, and of course, folks are now, again, thinking about, for those wheat farmers, getting wheat back into the ground, and there are some challenges there as well. And what does that look like so far, and as far as predicting how it's going to be going here in the next couple weeks?
So I've been with Extension since 2008, and this year was easily the latest that we've ever planted wheat. I know we got our district plots in on October 19th as well as October 20th, that Thursday and that Friday, and there was a lot of producers that were way late as well, just because of the moisture that we had. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. The wheat wouldn't have came up if we wouldn't have had the moisture, so it pushed us back there, but it was a true blessing as well. Wheat acres in our area, I'm just going to say they're down as well. There's some of the producers that are planting it basically to get the stubble to plant their fall crops into, but wheat acres, unfortunately, in a whole, they are down compared to where we have been. But a lot of the wheat is up now, finally, and it hasn't had a chance to tiller out, so we are behind on it.
As far as some of the programming that's been going on in the Phillips-Rooks District within this past year, what are some of the highlights for you all, and what's been successful?
So one of our biggest challenges is weed control. So anytime that I can have Dallas or Kurt Thompson come out and hit on weed control, that we have a packed house for it. There's producers that, they're throwing everything at these weeds, and it's not working, unfortunately. So that is one thing that's very good. This year as well, in the wheat side of things, we had a Save the Flag Leaf meeting, and Eric DeWolf came out, our plant pathologist, and that was big. Unfortunately, if the price of wheat would have been a little higher, I think a lot more producers would have pulled the trigger and sprayed a fungicide. But those, I get a lot of producers at those kinds of meetings there. Those are probably our two highlights of the meetings we get the turnout for.
And you all try to provide a lot of resources and links for not only the events, but also some of these decision-making tools through K-State and other resources on your website, that being phillipsrooks.k-state.edu. What else do you provide to people if they want to look online?
Right. So we have our upcoming programs that are there. One of those which November 15th, we have a stocker feeder cattle update. We got specialists coming out there for that. And then we also have November 28th, we have a prairie dog control field day. That'll be there in the afternoon. And then that evening, we're going to have a predator calling and trapping control meeting as well. Extension Wildlife Specialist Charlie Lee will be out to do it. We also have our results from our wheat plots that we've had in the past, as well as some other information on leasing, etc. So take a look at the website, and if you have any questions, don't be afraid to call one of the Extension offices.
And Cody, one other layer to what producers and managers of some of these farm operations are dealing with is these economic challenges within this past year. What type of questions have been sent your way relating to what's going on in the management side of these operations?
Yeah, so Sarah, unfortunately, it's not just in our district. I think it's statewide, and I don't know when it's going to end, but I hope sooner than later. So we've been having a lot of questions on just being able to track your inputs and knowing where you're at. Where else can we cut back? Where can we try to save and be more efficient with what we have? We do a lot of programs with Mark Wood, Jordan Steele with the Kansas Farm Management Association, as well as Dan O'Brien. And basically, we always go back to the basics of tracking your inputs, knowing your cost of production, and then being able to hopefully help you in the marketing setting. And I wish that more of those producers were better at that. And everybody I talk to, they know how to grow the crops. They just don't know when the time is to pull the trigger, when to sell. But those are probably one of the biggest challenges, and especially as we go forward, some of the producers, they've got enough set back, but when we chew through that, where are we going to be when that's all said and done? So.
What type of resources or recommendations have you been pointing people towards when they do approach you with questions?
Right. So a lot of those, if there are questions that I can answer, we do that. Otherwise, our Ag Manager website, those production sheets as far as tracking those, again, the Kansas Farm Management, we've really tried to push for membership in it, and now is certainly the time. I know they don't want to spend any more money, but at the same time, maybe invest in that. Those guys are tremendous in it and can certainly help maybe guide you. That's another resource besides your banker that hopefully can help you make some more decisions and get out of these places. So.
And Cody, as kind of a final bit here, because you are involved with the 4-H youth program in your district, would you give us a brief recap on some of the highlights from the 2017 year relating to those youth?
Okay, so mainly in our 4-H side, my coworker and I, we oversee the Phillips County side. Rooks County, Anna and Rachel take care of that. But we have about 130 4-Hers. Obviously, the county fair is probably one of our biggest events there, but also is great. We brought kids to Discovery Days, also 4-H camp there at Rock Springs. Those are probably the big ones. We're just getting ready for Sunday. We have our 4-H Achievement Banquet, where we're going to highlight everybody for their PIN awards, their KAPs, recognize our key award winners, scholarship winners, etc. So those are the big deals there. We're kind of right in the middle of re-enrolling for next year and get ready to do it all over again next year.
And of course, another opportunity for people to contact your office and get involved with the extension program, and more specifically the 4-H youth program, if they know some kids interested or some kids that would benefit from those services. And it's been great to have you on, Cody. Thanks for coming and talking with us.
Thank you, Sarah. Sure appreciate it.
That, once again, was Agriculture and Natural Resources and 4-H Youth Development Agent from the Phillips-Rooks District, Cody Miller. He being one of many extension agents from across the state coming together here in Manhattan this week for the annual conference for K-State Research and Extension. I'm Sarah Moyer with Agriculture Today.
Thank you, Sarah. And our plan for tomorrow is to visit with yet one more extension agricultural agent, this time from the south central part of the state. Again, that'll be coming up on tomorrow's broadcast. We'll stand aside now for a few moments. When we come back, today's agricultural news headlines coming your way. Also, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. As always, with Greg Akagi. And still ahead, this week's K-State Horticulture segment featuring horticultural insect specialist Raymond Cloyd of K-State Research and Extension. All that still to come here on the K-State Radio Network. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. And over to today's agricultural news headlines now, courtesy in part of DTN, starting with an item that just crossed the wire a few minutes ago. A former Trump campaign official who has been linked to the Russia investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller has now withdrawn his nomination for a USDA post. Sam Clovis says in a letter to the president dated earlier this morning, he does not want to be a distraction or a negative influence. This week it was revealed that Clovis had communications with George Papadopoulos, who's admitted to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russian intermediaries. Questions have been raised about Clovis' qualifications to serve as the USDA's chief research administrator. Again, Sam Clovis withdrawing his nomination to that USDA position just earlier this morning. The amount of U.S. consumption of wheat has varied over the years, but how might that be tied to consumer trends and preferences? Here are the observations of one USDA economist in this report from the USDA's Rod Bain.
While U.S. wheat consumption has varied over the decades, it perhaps indicates a connection between consumption and consumer trends. Agriculture Department economist Jennifer Bond says previous research has shown
in the 1800s, Americans were eating 225 pounds of flour per person. 100 years later, that dropped by almost 100 pounds per person.
The post-World War II economic boom and more diverse food options led to a decline in wheat consumption. That was later reversed in the 1970s due to trends of consumers eating less animal protein.
So for about 3 decades, we saw increasing per capita consumption until the recent high point in the 2000s.
However, 2 recent food trends, high-protein, low-carb diets, and later gluten-free products, may have been behind lower wheat consumption during this century. Bond notes, though, that in between these trends, increased wheat consumption by Americans was recorded. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Invasive plants, one of the greatest threats to pasture land used for grazing and haying by Kansas ranchers. Todd Domer reports here a recent forum brought stakeholders together to discuss the problem and possible solutions.
More than 50 stakeholders attended the Noxious Weeds in Kansas Forum, hosted in late October in Manhattan by the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Nature Conservancy of Kansas Landscape Programs Manager Brian Obermeyer opened the forum by noting invasive plant species have caused an estimated $1.4 trillion in damages worldwide. Obermeyer and others in attendance confirmed Old World bluestem is spreading from roadways into native pastures throughout the state and quickly becoming the most serious threat to the Flint Hills ecosystem. OWB can invade neighboring pastures when seed is produced from nearby plants. Once OWB begins invading pastures, it can be very difficult to control and manage. In Kansas, cattle will graze native pastures and leave the unpalatable Old World bluestem almost untouched. If it were to continue spreading on rangeland and pasture in Kansas, it could have a significant effect on cattle production and wildlife habitat. Participants at the Noxious Weed meeting in Manhattan discussed options for updating the 1937 Kansas Noxious Weed Law, but did not reach consensus on specific legislative proposals. I'm Todd Domer.
And on the trade front, China appears to be flouting the spirit of its World Trade Organization commitments, and that is keeping the U.S. and others at bay as they seek more access to the Chinese market. This, according to a senior Trump administration official. Progress on a range of bilateral economic issues with China has become increasingly difficult, according to this official, talking with reporters during a briefing ahead of President Trump's visit to Asia and China. This individual saying that they believe this reflects a slowdown and even a retreat in China's move toward a market-oriented economy. While China had initially made reforms and improved access to their markets, this official said that they think what we're seeing is a trajectory of moving away from market-based principles. And as a member of the WTO, this, they say, sets the stage for a potential showdown at the WTO between China, the U.S., and other countries. Next up on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. And standing by with that is Greg Akagi. Greg?
Josh Rowe, Kansas Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, joins us. And Josh, the process is underway for the election of new commissioners to Kansas commodity commissions, and that includes the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. For this rotation for the 2018 election, we will be focusing on the westernmost district seats, and that's districts 1, 2, and 3, the western one-third of the state. And with the makeup of the Soybean Commission, they have one commissioner that represents all of western Kansas.
Now, if there are producers out there who still may be interested in running, can they still apply to be able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. They have until November 30th to submit all their paperwork to us. It's a pretty straightforward process. The one piece, probably the most important piece to get ahead of, is to finish out, to become a valid candidate, you need to have 20 signatures of registered soybean growers with no more than 5 of those coming from any given county. So something you got to think of a little bit ahead of time. The rest of the paperwork is very straightforward.
Now, if you're a producer, say you want to vote in the Soybean Commission elections, what do you need to do?
2 ways there. If you've voted in the past, so, that's on a 3-year cycle. So if you voted in the 2015 election, you're in our database. You will automatically receive a ballot there. And if you don't remember, if you did in the past, you can actually go to our website at agriculture.ks.gov, and it's under the Services banner and then Kansas Commodity Commissions. You can register online, and then obviously another avenue that will automatically register you to vote is if you're asked to sign a petition for a potential candidate, that will automatically put you in the race as well.
You'd mentioned 3-year cycles, so there are 3-year terms, and is it every year that 3 districts of the 9 districts are up for election?
Yep, every year, and it rotates from west to east throughout the state. So in the 2019 elections will be our central districts 4, 5, and 6.
All right. Josh, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Greg.
That is Josh Rowe, Kansas Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, who joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
And Greg Akagi with that update. Many thanks, Greg. After the break, this week's K-State Horticulture segment is coming your way. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Now on Agriculture Today, this week's K-State Horticulture segment. With the weather changing, as you've undoubtedly noticed here in recent days, insects are starting their migration to the indoor setting, and we'll talk about that and some other landscape insect concerns as well for this point of the season. Raymond Cloyd is with us. He's a horticultural entomologist with K-State Research and Extension. Well, Raymond, you are now hearing from homeowners about bugs entering their homes, their outbuildings. Hardly unusual, but what exactly do we find out there right now?
Well, Eric, we have a number of what we call invasive invaders this time of year that start migrating into the home. One of them is the box elder bug and the red-shouldered bug. They both look very similar. Box elder bug is found on box elder, where the red-shouldered bug is found on golden rain trees. And they'll start moving in the home. And, of course, the other one is the infamous Asian ladybird beetle that will start sunning itself on the south side of your home and then entering your house and staying there for the whole winter. Now, again, they're not going to cause any damage, but they will bite you. You don't want to squish them, for one. And they'll just get on the corners of a windowsill, south side, and just reside in there for the winter, and then they'll become active in the spring as soon as they've used up their food sources. So we generally recommend vacuum them up, putting them outside, and and keep doing that. So then we have ants will start coming in also, crickets, things like that, to escape the confines of the winter temperatures as they start decreasing.
Virtually all of these, Raymond, are annoyances and maybe not much more in a damage sense. However, you don't want them around, clearly. So getting rid of them, like you said, but excluding them from your dwelling as best you can, right?
Absolutely. Sealing the cracks and crevices, door seals and things like that is always going to keep things out. Spiders will come in too. But just sealing cracks and crevices, especially on the south side and the west side of the buildings, which most of them will enter, especially the Asian ladybird beetle, exclusion is always one of the, of course, components of we call pest management programs. Yeah, so excluding them, keep them outside is going to help alleviate problems when they do get inside. At least the numbers should not be as great.
But in our outbuildings, a garage or a tool shed outside, a barn, using insecticides to deal with these. A good idea?
Well, not really. And that's another issue we can talk about is these use of foggers, which are primarily used for ticks and fleas. And even bed bugs, and there's some issues with those. But, we really don't recommend spraying because a lot of these insects and spiders can hide very easily. Mm-hmm. And so your level of mortality or kill is not going to be sufficient enough to do the job. So I think the physical approaches, the exclusion, vacuuming, sweeping, cobwebs, or whatever, is going to be much more effective than spraying an insecticide in any of these outbuildings that you're talking about.
For those who still have bagworms on their landscape conifers, they could well put a dent in that problem by hand-picking those bags now, could they not?
Absolutely. And it's too late to spray. I mean, they're in that we call the brown or green K stage. And it's always important to remember that the females stay in that bag. They will eventually die, but not before laying between 500 to 1,000 eggs. And so anytime you can go out there and pick bags between now and spring and put them in soapy water to kill them, that's always going to alleviate problems for next year. It won't eliminate it, but at least it'll remove those bags that would hatch into larvae and start spreading on your plants. So hand-picking bags is a very effective means this time of year of potentially alleviating problems with bagworms for next year.
If they are hard to reach on a larger plant, why take all necessary steps to do so with some caution, of course.
Yeah, we have to think practical. When you got 100-foot, right, cedar or spruce, you got to be, you can rent a cherry picker or whatever. But for like junipers and thuya arborvitae that are reachable, I mean, just get your kids out there on a weekend on a nice day and start hand picking the bags, put them in soapy water, and make a dent for next year in the populations.
If you have one of these nicer late fall days, that'd be an ideal project to take on. Want to finish, Raymond, talking of the use of dormant oils for insect control on our ornamentals in the winter. You endorse these where needed?
Yeah, Eric, I really endorse them for fruit trees because the fact that they're only used when plants don't have leaves on them because now these are dormant oils we use in the wintertime like the Volk oils. And they're very effective in killing mites and scales that overwinter on the trees, especially as egg stages. If you have had a problem with scales or mites, this is a way to alleviate potential problems for next year. Most of the ornamentals that are out there, the conifers know, anytime you have a tree that has had mite or scale issues and they do lose their leaves, oaks would be one example, some oaks, then a dormant oil might be a means of killing those overwinter stages that are on the tree. Yes.
And just briefly, administering these products, it's a matter of simply coating the bark of that tree to affect the control we're talking about?
Yeah, the coverage should be on the branches and the bark. And remember, you don't want to spray when the temperatures get below 45 degrees Fahrenheit because then you can you maybe burn the plant possibly or cause some harm, especially on younger plants. So you want to spray when the ambient temperature is between about 50 to 60, but when it gets low, be very, very cognizant of that.
And these are largely spray products, although some can be actually painted on, can they not?
Well, most of them we recommend are spray. spray applications. The bulk oils are spray applications. But again, they're really underutilized, mainly because people don't understand their use of them. But if you're growing apples or pears or any of the fruit trees, and they do get scales or mites, very, very effective means of killing those overwintering stages, which primarily are the eggs.
So once more, a project to complete before we get into the harsh, cold winter weather. One of these warmer fall days, you can apply those dormant oils to your fruit trees in particular and allow a little extra protection against insect issues there. Lastly, although it is very much the end of the growing season for the most part, Raymond, we've these insect issues still out there, so you'd advise folks to utilize fully the extension resources available to them.
We have some very good sources. We still have an insect diagnostician who has a schedule to visit our website. We have fact sheets for many of the field crop and horticultural insects, and we have people with extension appointments there to help because as the season transcends, now we get into a different scenario with the invasive type of insects coming in. We always still deal with the bed bugs and fleas and ticks and things like that. Place to start is to go to entomology.ksu.edu and look for the extension tab there. As always, we appreciate your time, Raymond. Thank you. Eric, I always enjoy it. Look forward to seeing you next month.
That's Raymond Cloyd. He's a research and extension horticultural entomologist here at K-State. Our thanks to you for tuning in, and please rejoin us here tomorrow this same time, won't you? Until then, and for Sarah Moyer, Eric Atkinson here, this has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.